Hey everyone, welcome back. This is a part two in Pixlr. So this is the part two of the still life. So in part one, we did the setup of the canvas. So for this part two, I am going to have to do some uh, dramatic changes, and that's because my Wi-Fi and my device that I'm on have changed, and they're unfortunately not very good. So um, what I'm going to do in this part two is I'm going to start off by coming over here with the layers, and I'm going to create a brand new empty layer, and I'm going to go ahead and rename that layer by right mouse clicking on it. I'm going to go ahead and call it BG for background. Okay, and then I'm going to move the layer down towards the bottom. Now what happens in Pixlr, and I think this is kind of silly, but what happens is that the locked layers underneath won't let me rearrange the layers on the top. That's just what I've discovered. So what I need to do is I need to go to the locked layers and either right mouse click on them and just unlock them temporarily. And then I can take my background layer and make sure it is underneath everything else. Okay, then I can go back to the other ones and relock them. So not difficult, but kind of silly. I'll go to my background layer and I will come over here to the paint bucket tool, and I'm going to choose for a color. I'm going to click on my color picker. Most artists don't like to work on a white background. It's very hard on your eyes, and it's kind of gives you artist block sometimes when you're staring at a blank white screen. It's very much if you're trying to write a paper or write something and you're staring at that blinking cursor and it's just haunting your soul. So one way you can do it is to go ahead and give yourself what's called a toned canvas. And you can give it colors. Some popular colors are things like this, like a really pale blue, or maybe even like a kind of a tan color, kind of a tan canvas. I like to usually start off with just a grayscale one. So if you look over here, you're going to see it says H, S, and B. H stands for hue, S for saturation, B for brightness. So if you're all the way up at the top, you have 100% brightness, and that's because it's white. If you have it all the way down to black, you have 0% brightness because it's black. So if you want it right in the middle, you can just type in 50 for brightness, and then you get it perfectly in the middle, and of course you get a gray. So I'm going to click on OK. And with the paint bucket tool selected and my background layer selected, I'm just going to do a single click. And now I've got a nicely toned middle gray canvas. And what that allows me to do is now for the sketching, I can create a brand new empty layer. And I'm going to rename this layer Sketch. There we go. And that's on the top because I'm going to start drawing. And because it's a middle gray layer, now if I choose a darker color like black, or if I choose white for a brightness, I can go ahead and I can do that, and everything will be a-okay. All right, one last thing I'm going to do before I start sketching is I'm going to turn this apple into a black and white version of itself. So I actually want both. I want a black and white version and I want the color version, because eventually I'm going to add color to this still life after I've done all my values. Okay, so I want to duplicate this apple layer. So to duplicate it, I'm going to right mouse click on the layer, and I'm going to go ahead and choose duplicate layer. Okay, so now I've got my copy, and the top copy, I'm going to go ahead and rename it, and I'm just going to call it Apple BW for black and white. Okay, and then to turn it black and white, I'm going to, with it selected, I'm going to come up here to the adjustment menu, and I'm going to choose desaturate. Okay, and then that way I get a nice, nice black and white grayscale version of it. And right underneath it, you can see is the color version. So that way I can pick colors. Now, if I want to kind of intensify this because it's kind of washed out, I can come up here, back up here to adjustment, and I can choose brightness and contrast. Let me move it off to the side here. And I can increase the contrast. So there we go. Now the darks are getting darker and the brights are getting a little brighter. I can play around with the brightness slider. You don't want to go too bright because then everything gets kind of washed out. So I think something like that is pretty good. Now, a cool thing that Pixlr has is down here in the bottom left corner, it says compare, hold down. So if I click and hold, that shows what it was before. And when I lift up on my mouse, that shows what it is after. So that way, before, after, you can see it's definitely an improvement. So I'm going to say apply. Okay, so that's going to be it for this part here. I'm going to pause the video and then I'll pick it back up for the next section. Okay, so now I'm ready to go ahead and get started drawing. And again, because I said before, my device and my Wi-Fi situation has changed. I am going to actually be doing the drawing in another program, and it's going to be called Krita or Krita. But let me show you in Pixlr what brush I would be using, or what brush settings. So I'm going to go press B for brush. I'm going to go up here to the brush settings, and for the first bit of sketching, I'm going to go ahead and use a soft edge brush, and I'm going to go ahead and use a size of about 10. Now that size of 10 works for what I have here. Okay, and then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the opacity down because I'm going to use the color black, and I'm going to change the opacity to much lower because I don't want solid black lines. So I'm going to start off with the opacity at around 30%. Okay, so again, soft edge brush, size 10, just so it's nice and thin. You can kind of see it there. And an opacity of 30% so that it's quite see-through. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and switch over to Krita, and I will see you there. Okay, everyone, so I'm back. I know my screen looks different. This is Krita or Krita. So don't pay attention to the surrounding interface here. Just pay attention to the screen, the workspace here. So I have a brush that kind of mimics what I would have in Pixlr. So now basically what you do is you just use the grid on the left-hand side to match up with what's on the right-hand side. So the apple in this case is basically a circle, right? It's a sphere. So what you want to do for your first step is you want to break your still life down to basic shapes. So if I was doing for this apple here, it might be a combination of ellipses, really rough and loose, and then a bigger circle, just to get the feel of it, just to get the basic layout. Okay, so break your shape down to those simpler shapes. If you're doing something more complex, again, like maybe a figure, maybe a real simple circle, a shape for the jawline, maybe a oval here for a neck, circle for the shoulder, another oval for the arm, elbow. You kind of get the idea. Break the form down into very simple shapes. The torso could be a cylinder or a cube from the side. So do that breakdown of geometric shapes, and then you'll be good to go. Okay, now once you have the breakdown, so I'm going to go ahead and just get the basic shape. I'm not really paying attention too much to it. I'm just kind of mapping it out, just kind of getting it. There we go. Something real loose like that. Okay, so now what I can do is, now that I've got the basic feel, and again, it's approximate, I can come over here to my layers list, and again in Pixlr, it does look different, but I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer. And now what I can do is I can go in and I can really just look grid square for grid square. So starting up at the top here, I can kind of see how much of this top grid square here. I can see it's 1, 2, 3, 4 over. So if you see on the third grid square, it's just a little tiny bit. So if I do that 1, 2, 3, and so now I can start drawing something that's a little bit more accurate. And if I see the fourth grid square over here, you can see that it kind of comes, down here, and I'm just kind of mapping it out. And so this is the part that does take a while. So again, I can come here to this fifth grid square and see that it's rising up a little bit, and then it goes down a little bit, and you can just kind of figure things out. And so that's the next part of the process, is just going through and matching up grid square over here on your reference image, matching it up to the grid square over here. And sometimes you will find that you have to do a couple, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and do that counting process. So go ahead and do that, and just go square to square to square. Don't worry that it's not looking perfect. You want to get just as approximate as you possibly can. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, and I'll pick back up when I've got some more done. Okay, so you can see that I've kind of made my way around. My lines are very kind of wavy. That's fine. So I'm literally just going from square to square. So here I am over here on the left-hand side. I'm looking at it, and that's this square over here. So I'm looking at this square here, and I'm saying it's taking up approximately half of that square. So again, figure out where half of the square is. And again, my object is fairly rounded. And then in the next one here, you can see it's taking up just the corner there. So again, just kind of the corner there. And then up here, it's just kind of this bottom half, and then kind of connecting there. Okay, so it looks really rough, ugly, whatever you want to call it. But that's it for this phase. The next step is to go ahead in and maybe clean up those lines a little bit, go over it with another pass. I suggest that you go ahead and you make another layer. You could come over here and you could lower the opacity. So for instance, again, I know I'm in Krita, so I can lower the opacity really quickly. In Pixlr, though, you come over to the layer and you right mouse click on the layer, and you can choose the transparency. Let's see if I... So what you can do is when I go to Pixlr, again, to make any layer change its transparency, simply right click on it and change the transparency. So that way when you do that, you can definitely see through it, and then you can add in a new layer, a new empty layer, and then you can go ahead and make a much cleaner, smoother line. Okay, so this will be it for the this tutorial, and then in the next one we'll talk about how to kind of map out different areas for your lights and your darks of your values. So thank you very much, and I will see you in the next video.